Dr. E. Michael Jones. It's been a while since you've been on the show, but I think we're going to have a slightly different flavor today. Last time, I think I had the habit of debating you, but something you said in your last show on the Dean show made me feel let's go for a different approach. You said when you were a young man, you didn't know anything. I still feel like a young man. So today I'm going to be just asking you questions.
Okay.
What did you mean by that when you said, do you think that's a good approach? What do you think we should do compared to what we did last time?
Well, a discussion is probably more fruitful than a debate because it's a debate is automatically adversarial, and that's not what we're
Yeah.
trying to talk about today. We're trying to talk
Yes.
about collaboration. So a discussion allows for a meeting of the minds, which I think what we need to have.
That's true. I've always tried to not really debate, but try to understand each other. But I think there's always the impulse of trying to win the discussion or the debate. Anyway, I emailed you the other week saying I really enjoyed watching you on a popular Muslim YouTube channel called The Dean Show. And that particular Muslim suggested a collaboration between Catholics and the Muslims. And I emailed you saying that's really in the spirit of Islam because there's a verse of the Quran. I'll briefly quote it. O people of the book, that's both Jews and Muslims, come to a word equal between us that we worship one but Allah, and that we associate no partner with him, and that some of us take not others for lords beside Allah. But if they turn away, then say, bear witness that we have submitted to God. Quran chapter 3, 65 or 64, depends how you number it. Some people might be a bit upset by the words Allah for God, and you seem to use that word in the
Yeah,
Dean
Eddie
show.
was
You didn't.
taken aback when I said he was talking to me about. I think he was trying to tell me I got the wrong version of Islam because I went to Iran, and he's trying to tell me that he can set me straight by putting me in contact with the real Muslims, the Sunni. And I said, why did Allah take me to Iran? And because I used the word Allah, he was taken aback. He didn't think I was going to use that word. It's just a word for God. But the
Yeah.
question remains. I was in Cairo in 1994 going to the World Population Conference. And I met a woman on the plane, and we had a long discussion about population, about sex, about the whole thing. I thought we had a meeting of the minds. And she was going to introduce me to her friends at the university, at the Islamic University in Cairo. Never happened. It never happened. She got off the plane. She put on her hijab. She met her father, and that's the last I saw of her. I kept trying to call her, so it
Maybe
didn't
her
work.
dad had other plans.
Well, I think that's what happened. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
so nothing happened. I went to the conference. It was basically there was something significant because there was a kind of alliance there between the Iranians and the Vatican over population control and abortion specifically. So there was a kind of straw in the wind. I didn't know anything about Iran in 1994, and then suddenly in 2013, Nader Talibzadeh invited me to come to Iran. It was an experience that opened my eyes to a whole new world. It's a whole new world. I had never been any place like this. And I'm a typical American in this regard because historically, America has had zero contact with Islam. We're just too far away. It's just not part of our experience. I talked about the American identity. I just did a book on American identity. It's called the Triple Melting Pot. 3 ethnic groups based on 3 religions. No matter where you come from, when you come to America after 3 generations, your ethnic identity is Protestant, Catholic, or Jew. These are the main groups, religious groups in America, and that's the way you grow up. And you don't hear anything about Muslims.
Do you
There's
think
someplace
they
else.
are,
They're over
or
there.
They are or were, because Islam's the fastest growing religion in the West. Certainly, or where I'm from in the UK, it's all over the place.
Absolutely. It's a
Yeah,
different world. You're absolutely right.
yeah.
And this, we're talking about something 30 years ago, at least 30 years ago. And you're talking about growing up, you're talking about 50, 60 years ago. So the world is changing. So my son moves to Dearborn, works for Ford. Dearborn's a Muslim city, pretty much, but that's unusual. That's unusual. Now it's changing. Now it's changed a lot more in England. It's much more significant in England than it is over here. But even here, it's changing because you have a man running for a mayor of New York. His name's Mondami, and he's got one of those names. I never heard that name before, and it's the first time a Muslim has been significant in American politics. And that also is significant because what we're talking about is a tremendous change in American politics. If there were ever a city that was run by Jews, it was New York City. But what happened recently is the whole Gaza genocide. And suddenly the Democratic Party has distanced itself from the Jews. That's a revolutionary change in American politics.
One reason why I enjoyed your discussion on the Dean show, there was a sort of spiritual element, and you were asking him a question. He said, why do you asked the host of that show, why do you think God sent you to Iran? You asked that. What's the answer? What do you think?
Because he wanted me to talk to the people. Because he wanted to introduce me to a world where we had to have a discussion. Because
Islam.
God, to Islam, Islam, but specifically Iranian Islam,
Okay.
which is different. So we have reached a point in human history. God is in charge of human history. And we have to understand that. He brings us together for purposes, and we have complete free will when it comes to those purposes. I had an incident in South Bend, Indiana. I'm taking a walk in the rain in May, and the river's flooding, and a black woman crosses the street, and she comes to me and says to me, "Do you have a cell phone?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm the only guy in South Bend doesn't have a cell phone." She says, "Well, I want to call my mama because I'm going to kill myself." And then she jumped over the ledge and was standing on the ledge and is ready to jump into the river. So I talked to her, tried to say, "No, this is not a good idea." I said, "God has a plan for your life, and it's not killing yourself." And so we went back and forth. And then I said a prayer. And then she miraculously climbed back over. And a cop took her away. And that was she's not dead now. I hope she isn't dead. Anyway, so the point I'm trying to make here is the interaction between God's plan and human freedom. So I was predestined from all eternity to meet that woman on the bridge. And she was predestined to meet me because God had planned to save her life. Now, if I had left 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later, I wouldn't have met her. That was predestined. I had no choice in that matter. But when I got there, I could have said, push her aside. "No, too busy. I'm doing my cardio workout. Can't talk to you." I could have done that. She could have, when she climbed over the railing, she could have jumped in the river. But that didn't happen because of human freedom. And that's the kind of interaction between God's plan and human freedom that we have to understand. So when I got the call to go to Iran, everybody's telling me they're all terrorists. They're going to take you and throw you in the trunk of a Toyota Corolla, and we'll never see you again. And I said, this is pointless. This is fear. What is needed? Fear is useless. What is needed is love. And so I went there kind of trusting. It turned out to be great experience, one of the greatest experiences of my life, because it opened my eyes to a world that I didn't know at all.
Fantastic. Yeah. There's so much. I'm nodding as you talk. I'm trying not to interrupt too much, but there is so much that we agree on in terms of religious beliefs. Like I think we both are against the idea of people committing suicide. We both believe in an all-powerful God who has a plan for us, and that's why we don't commit suicide, because even though life becomes difficult, God has a plan for us to do something great with our lives. So there's a lot that resonates between us, and hopefully, I'm hoping we're going to have a lot of live streams together, if that's okay with you, like, over the months,
Sure.
not every week, but
Sure.
to build this relationship. I'm making excuses to ask this question. This is the first half I want to talk about is the Zionist powers, and you said a whole bunch of stuff that I was thinking about, and I was wondering why nobody was talking about it, and why Charlie Kirk's wife just seems to be going along with this idea that some teenager killed his wife, killed her husband, and the whole thing about her just doing a speech as if nothing happened. And I don't want to lead this conversation too much, but I was not happy the way she went and hugged Trump, because I don't have too many good opinions of Trump. Like, essentially, I think he's a big pedo, and he's the kind of person who would have gone after her if she was a bit younger. So my question is, what do you know about because you mentioned Charlie Kirk's wife was introduced by Trump to Charlie Kirk. I don't know much about this, but it all seems to add up, and there's a bit of a background to the question, because there seems to be a lot of wives, Jewish wives of powerful people like our current prime minister in the UK, and there seems to be some sort of method. Do you know much about this kind of whole process of controlling people through their wives? It's some people call it like a honeypot. I can't remember what they call it, the phrase to attract people.
Yeah, honeypot. You can type that into X, and all the stuff comes up on Erica Kirk. So you're not the only person who's thinking this way. They met in Israel. I just had an experience just yesterday, Friday, did the podcast on a man by the name of Professor Robert George of Princeton University, a big mover and shaker in conservative circles. Time magazine said he was the most important conservative thinker in the country. Okay, what's conservatism? What is it? Judeo-Christian morality. It's an alliance between Catholics and Jews. And it got started right after the Second Vatican Council, when the Catholic Church issued a statement on other religions. So there's a chapter on Islam, and then there's a chapter on Judaism. Well, the Jews jumped in. They have the control of the media, and they took over this Catholic document and basically brainwashed an entire generation of Catholics. The Jews were their elder brothers. Robbie George was one of the main proponents of this. Wait, this is not in Scripture. If you read Scripture, it's the story of the antagonism between Jews, two types of Jews: the Jews who accepted Jesus Christ as the Messiah, and the Jews who crucified him. And now you got somebody like this coming along, by the way, who has a Jewish wife, as far as I understand. Okay, he comes along and says, well, the Jews can be saved by their covenant. That's not Catholic teaching. This is a Jewish distortion. The Jews have paid for this distortion, spent a lot of money hijacking the teaching of the Catholic Church to the point where they control who's a Catholic in good standing. What am I saying about that? If you Google, let's take a guy who, here's a podcast. This guy, E. Michael Jones, he's great. I'm going to ask the pastor to invite him to our parish. He goes to the pastor and says, invite E. Michael Jones. Do you know what that pastor will do? I guarantee you this. He will type my name into the Google search engine, and the first thing that will come up was the ADL's character assassination. And this Catholic will take this ADL character assassination as normative. Priest will do it. A priest will do it. This is a horrendous situation because they basically have stolen Catholic identity. It's a massive case of identity theft. So I was just in Dallas.
But tell me, what do you know much about this whole? Do you know any more facts about the whole Charlie Kirk wife situation? Like,
sure. So Charlie Kirk starts off as a standard shill for the Republican Party. He's 18 years old when he starts going around to college campuses. And we linked up with him about 5 years ago when one of my employees went to a Turning Point conference and went at this time, Charlie Kirk is promoting homosexuality because the government, the Republican Party, is promoting homosexuality, and he's just doing what they tell him to do. So my employee says, how is promoting sodomy going to help us win the culture wars? And the black homosexual there, he starts ranting. But the interesting thing was Charlie, he didn't know what to say. He was confronted. Now, this is exactly the story of Charlie Kirk. He's confronted. He goes to these college campuses. He's confronted by people who are telling him what their real concerns are. And he's confronted with command control, the Republican Party, and big Jewish donors paying him money to say the opposite. And he can't bring these two things together. Existence is changing him. And at a certain point, he's getting a lot of money. He's getting millions from Bill Ackman, millions from the Shillman Foundation, $2 million a year from the Shillman Foundation, which is the main Muslim bashing operation in the United States of America. Okay. So he's realizing he's got a constituency and he's got backers, and the constituency does not say the same thing that the backers say. And he's sort of saying, well, I have a responsibility to my constituency. And he starts understanding what they're saying, and the backers are getting upset. And so
this Bill is later on, you mean? Not in the beginning.
I'm saying this is August of this year.
Yeah.
This is August of this year. Bill Ackman calls Charlie to his Hamptons estate on Long Island and says, look, you're getting off the reservation. We're not paying you money to have you turn on us. And Shillman at that point cut him off $2 million. That's here, no more money from the Shillman Foundation. And then within a month, 2 months, someone kills him. And I'm saying that he has tweets now to people like Candace Owens saying, look, I'm tired of these people ordering me around. At this point, between those two things, Netanyahu shows up, has a meeting, offers him $150 million as long as he stays on the reservation. It was clear that this man was leading a lot of people, the whole younger generation. He was leading them off the reservation. And the Jews did not like it. And if the Jews don't like what you do, they have a right to kill you. And this, I'm saying, is the fundamental issue that faces the world right now. Is there a universal moral law? Are we obligated by God, who created us, who wrote that moral law on our hearts? Are we obligated to follow this moral law and oppose people who say there is no moral law? Who am I talking about? Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister in Israel, announced one day, let me get this straight, one day after Charlie Kirk was murdered, he announced, we are God's chosen people and we don't have to follow international law. That's on Facebook. One day before Charlie Kirk's assassination, the Israelis announced that after they assassinated the Palestinians, or tried to assassinate the Palestinians in Doha, they say, doesn't matter where you are, no one is safe. We'll come and get you anywhere. Well, I think that the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming that these are the people that killed Charlie Kirk. We have the Mossad certainly has the ability to do this kind of stuff. They have been doing assassinations ever since the beginning of the state of Israel. Count Folk Bernadotte all the way up to the present. They brag about the assassinations. How many Iranian nuclear scientists have they assassinated? And now they're saying it's not just the Mideast anymore. You're not safe anywhere. And then the next day, Charlie Kirk is dead.
Yep, a lot of people consider the Zionists to have killed him. So I want to step back and come back to hopefully our collaboration. And I want to give a sort of Muslim perspective about the problem that we're facing. You can call it the Jewish problem, so the Zionist problem. I think from a Muslim, this whole scenario where we've got a great power that's where we're facing, that is predicted in Islam in the form of the Antichrist. So we call it Dajjal, the great deceiver. And so many people believe that this Antichrist has already come. To give you an idea of what, I'm not sure what you've heard of the Antichrist from a Muslim perspective, but just a few of the signs. He'll be supported by 70,000 Jews. He would ride a white donkey that would jump from the east to the west, holding onto clouds as it did. It might sound a bit strange, but maybe when you hear a few of these descriptions, you might better put it together yourself. When it was on water, so there's different, let's say, forms of this Antichrist. When it's on water, it would carry mountains of food and give it only to those who worship it. It would make heaven look like hell and vice versa. It would make rain. It would only be able to see with through one eye. So my question to you, I guess, is, do you think the Antichrist has come? Does the Islamic Antichrist seem like the Illuminati, the famous all-seeing eye? And do you think in any way this is the source of the Jewish power? Like, are the Illuminati Jewish, essentially? What are your thoughts? You can respond to it as you like.
Okay, first of all, the Illuminati were an actual group. They existed at the time of it's 1776. There was a man by the name of Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt taught canon law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria. And this was a time when Freemasonry was a powerful force in Europe, especially in France. The British were promoting Freemasonry to bring down the Bourbon monarchy. That was the source of Freemasonry. The Whigs created the Grand Lodge in 1721. And over that time, they established lodges to basically take over all of England. That's the Illuminati. It was in existence. It stopped. It ceased to exist. There's no such thing as the Illuminati anymore. But the book that was written about it was Barruel's History of Jacobinism. Was a huge underground bestseller during the 19th century, and revolutionaries read it. So Shelley read it and decided to resurrect the Illuminati. And he went to Byron, Godwin, and they had this little literary meeting. But it's not the Illuminati. Okay, it never came back. Another man who read it was Sigmund Freud. He got the idea of psychoanalysis from the Illuminati because it's basically Weishaupt took the Jesuit examination of conscience and weaponized it to control people. So that's all the Illuminati. The other thing is the Antichrist. In order for the Antichrist to come, there has to be a great apostasy, a great falling away. I don't see that happening. I see the exact opposite happening. If you're talking about the Catholic Church, there was the huge bomb that went off was the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s after Vatican II. When all sorts of people came in. It was the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution was a Jewish operation. They promoted abortion and pornography to basically destroy my generation, the baby boomer generation. And now they are in decline and the Catholic Church is on the rise again. So I've talked to a friend who has studied scripture more than I do. He doesn't think it's happening. I don't think it's happening. There is a rise in consciousness now that is the opposite of what happened during the 1960s when nobody knew that the Jews were behind it. Nobody knew this. And if they knew it, they weren't allowed to say it because the Second Vatican Council said the Jews are our friends. And we had 60 years of pointless dialogue based on that. This is all falling away. We're at the end of the Third Republic in America. We have had three republics. 1781 to 1861 ended with the Civil War. 1865 to 1945, that ended with World War II when America became the world power empire. 1945 to 2025, that is ending now. And there are things that are ending with it. And one of the things is conservatism, which is based on the Judeo-Christian morality. That's a fiction. That doesn't exist anymore because after Roe versus Wade got overturned, the Jews announced that abortion is a fundamental Jewish value. Well, that means you can't collaborate with Catholics anymore because the Catholics said the exact opposite. And so this is a moment of consciousness that is enabling new alliances because the old alliances are breaking up. They don't work anymore.
Okay. So we've talked about, I wanted to start off with, to some extent, the Jewish power. And maybe some people might be confused by some of the things I said. So I might just reiterate one of the ideas and get your response. So when I described the Islamic idea of the Antichrist, it was a powerful force, let's say, that could harness lots of food, mountains of food. And this is when it's, traveling over water. And only those who would worship this power would be able to get the food. Otherwise, you'd starve. Does that at all sound like what we call humanitarian aid, where really it's an exchange for, if you take the food, you have to pay this much interest and you have to be subservient, etc., etc. I suppose my question is, does that sound familiar? And are these one of the ways the Jews control poorer countries?
Well, the food thing is Islamic. That's not in the Christian understanding of the
Sure.
Antichrist.
But even if you don't agree with that idea, like, do you see that as a mechanism for control?
Well, of course, it would be a mechanism of control, but the other mechanisms that are mentioned in this Catholic, in the Book of Revelations or in the Book of Daniel, is that he will prohibit marriage and prohibit economic exchange. Well, that's happened. This is what I find in general with the Quran. The Quran gets very specific about things that the Bible doesn't leave as specific. Christianity is a combination of Greek and Hebrew. Hebrew is a Semitic language. It's very concrete. It's not a philosophical language. So the Hebrews have a history, but they don't have philosophy. Greeks have philosophy, but they don't have history. And then they come together. So there's an element of abstraction in Christianity, like the word logos, which I keep using all the time. That is a very abstract term. And I think that Semitic people that speak Semitic languages have difficulty understanding it. And I think that comes with the understanding of the Quran, for example. So logos gets translated as book. Well, it's not. It's more than that. There are 5 pages of English equivalents for logos, and so you tend to have this over particularization. So so logos is eternal. Logos is God. That's what it says in the Gospel of St. John. That's pure Greek philosophy. That's not Semitic at all, and it requires a certain element of abstraction to understand it. So I think that's part of the problem when you try to compare the two texts, the Quranic and the Gospel text.
Okay, the Quran reiterates verses of the Bible, and I'm particularly interested in one verse that I think is the heart of the solution that we might be able to agree on to the Zionist problem, or any power that's evil. And the Quran says the righteous it reiterates what the Bible says. It literally says, we repeat the verse, the righteous will inherit the earth. And so there's a specific meaning, a general meaning, according from the Quranic perspective, because it's referring to the land of Palestine. So a way to take that back. But it also has a general meaning of, how to overcome evil powers. Be righteous yourself. Now, that might sound very simplistic, or people want a sort of a warlike behavior to get back land. I had a discussion with probably the most famous Zionist at Speaker's Corner in London. Do you know of Speaker's Corner? It's like
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Have you been there recently?
I used to. I was there for a year, but I'm now in the Middle East. I've been there for 2 years.
Okay, all right. Because I have a friend, Sean Norton, goes there on a regular basis. We had Catholics defending Dr. Rehiana Ali when she got suspended from the National Health Service. So we have people going to to Speaker's Corner in London. But go ahead.
Yeah, but yeah, I talked to probably the most famous Zionist there. He gets himself in a lot of trouble. I think his name is Joseph something. And anyway, we had a discussion, and I detailed this approach from the Bible and the Quran, why this is so effective. The righteous will inherit the earth. It's essentially how the Muslims are taking over the UK, because if you are at least relatively righteous compared to an atheistic group that's got no particular direction, no law that governs them, moral law that governs them, no sense of meaning in their lives, etc., you're essentially going to become way more powerful than anybody. When you work, you're not going to become depressed. So what my point is, in short, is that when you're righteous, you become more powerful, and you inevitably overcome any powers that are out there. Does that sound too weak?
No, it does. First of all, the Christian verse is much more paradoxical and emphatic. It says the meek will inherit the earth. This is, and St. Paul says, when I am weak, I am strong. Now, this is a paradox that's in the crucifixion. I mean, Jesus Christ was crucified. That's another bone of contention with the Muslims. Nader Talibzadeh did a movie on Jesus Christ where he wasn't crucified. They took him away. But you've got this paradox of the meek will inherit the earth. What do you mean by meek? You're submissive to the will of God. If you're submissive to the will of God, you will have God's power behind you, and that's more powerful than any power on this earth, even though it doesn't seem that way. And so what you have, in effect, what is the main submission in terms of sexuality? You submit to the law of God, and you have children, because that's the purpose of sexuality. Well, if you have children and the rest of the population does not have children, guess what? You're going to take over. And this is precisely the crisis in Europe, especially England. Okay, you accept the idea of contraception and abortion, you're going to go out of existence. And so my Irish friend, I always had this Irish lady on a show, and she's talking about all these people coming over. I said, you're right. This is weaponized migration by Jews. Barbara Landers Spector, George Soros, they're trying to destroy Ireland by weaponized migration. I agree with that. But on the other hand, you have to understand that for every Irish baby that the Irish aborted, God sent a Muslim or an African to replace them. That's the story of Europe.
Is that how you feel God sent?
What's that?
You feel that God, I mean, I probably agree, really, but you said it, that you put it just now, that God sent Muslims to these Western countries.
Yes. And I'll go further. I think it's a punishment. What is the traditional understanding of Islam from a Christian point of view? Islam is the scourge of God. Islam is die Peitsche Gottes. That's what Luther said. And whenever the Europeans get weak, the Turks start marching up the Danube, and they are going to punish. So the classic example is the Reformation, where Christians start fighting Christians, and the Turks start marching up, and they defeat the Hungarians at Mohacs, and they get all the way to Vienna. You have to this is part of the consciousness that we have in the West of Islam. It's in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Have you read the Lord of the Rings?
I've watched the movies. That's
okay, well, this is Vienna is Minas Tirith, and Minas Tirith is Vienna's surrounded by Turks, and they're ready to go down. And there's one man fighting in the breach, and suddenly the Polish cavalry sweeps in and destroys the Turks, and they drive them back. That's part of the European consciousness of Islam. Orcs are Turks, if you're looking at the historical correlative. That's Tolkien's understanding of history. But my understanding is a kind of sublimation of that, is that Islam is a punishment. Europe is being punished for turning away from God. And they turned away from God by not having children. And so what you have here is the plan of God. God's not nature abhors a vacuum. God abhors a vacuum. But we have to see this from in a sophisticated way. Tommy Robinson is paid to inflame the British soccer hooligans against Muslims. He's paid by Jews to do that. Okay. And I'm telling the soccer hooligans, just back off a little bit. Let's understand this from God's perspective. Okay. So we are being punished. We deserve to be punished for contraception and abortion. But God has not abandoned us. And so Hegel called this the cunning of reason. This is the way God works in human history. He allows the wicked to carry out their plans, but he turns it into good. And so what happened? You have people, Muslims coming into England, who are more conservative when it comes to sexual morality than the natives are. Well, there's the basis for a natural alliance between the Catholics who accept church teaching that you have fertility is part of sexuality and the Muslims. So we have a natural basis for an alliance there. We can both work against transgenderism, the promotion of homosexuality, abortion, the whole thing. That is the basis for our collaboration.
Great. Okay. So even though we will both agree that the other person is not right in this way or that way, and that's the kind of thing I'm trying to avoid, but you feel free to say we're the scourge or something, whatever you call it. But I want to ask you some hard questions because, well, I don't know if it's a hard question, but modern day Christians have been really watering down their religions and not particularly having a hard line on day-to-day behavior, including marriage. So specifically, let me ask you, the Islamic point of view is, and it's particularly on, let's say, sex, right? Would you say that you're a terrible person if you have sex outside marriage? And not only that, let's push it a bit further, that women should, to encourage the contract of marriage to hold, they have to do their part. And so if men want sex, women should be open to it. So in Islam, there are teachings of Islam that if a man wants sex, even if she's cooking, she should make herself available, right? Because otherwise there is no benefit to having marriage. And then on top of that, I would say Islam recommends women don't go to work because that's one of the major reasons why people are not having babies. And the number one reason why people are not having babies is not because they don't want to have babies, because women are following their careers, and it takes till when you're 40 years old, and then it's all over. You're too late.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So, I mean, the Catholic Church doesn't have a teaching on whether you can have sex while your wife's cooking dinner. That's you can leave that to the people. But
no, she should leave it, not why.
Whatever.
We don't have to do it at the same time. But if you're into that kind of thing,
that's between the man and the wife. But what happened over this period of time is that where there was a Catholic influence on American culture, simply because there were a lot of us here, and one of the main influences was the rehabilitation of labor. The Catholics were members of unions, and there's a Catholic teaching that says basically the family wage should be the basis of your economy. What's a family wage? A family wage means that the father earns enough so that his wife can stay home and raise the children. Detroit believed in the family wage in the 1950s. I met a man here, industry in this country. I met a man in a bar. He said he was one of 13 children and his father was a janitor at a factory. Because that man benefited from the family wage, the high wage. It was accepted that men should get the jobs and women should stay at home and raise the children. Now, that was destroyed in the 1970s because of feminism. Feminism was Jewish psychological warfare. All of the major feminists were Jews. Betty Friedan's name was Betty Goldstein. She was a Jew. She was a communist. And instead of talking about class conflict, she talked about family conflict. And they came up with the formula called equal pay for equal work. Who can argue with equal pay for equal work? Except that it destroyed the family wage, which meant that now women were, once you let women into the workforce, once you double the workforce, wages go down to where they were half of what they were. And when wages become half of what they were, the woman has to work. So you have to have men and women working now, and that means the woman can't raise her children. That means she's using contraception, or if she has a child, sending to a daycare center. This was catastrophic for American life.
But the problem, I think here we can either be victims or do something about it. And I'm asking you, would you be, I think part of the cooperation from my perspective between us is to push these family values again and be tough on them. What I mean by that is that we make a lot of excuses that we're all victims to this economic system, but you'll find, I think you might agree, that somehow it's the poor that have the most kids. So that belies this idea that it's too expensive to have kids. There's something Charlie Kirk said: have more kids than you can afford. But that's actually the way he said it. But the Muslim perspective is God provides, so have kids. Don't worry about it.
Absolutely. That's exactly the point. It's God. Do you believe in God? Do you believe that God is in charge of human history? Do you believe that God cares for you as an individual? Then don't worry about money. Then don't worry about money. Now that's easy to say, but what is the one thing you should never do if you don't want to worry about money? Don't go into debt. And of course, this is precisely the problem with this generation, because they went into debt for college and things like that. That's a horrible situation to be in, and Charlie Kirk understood that, and he was working against it. But what you're saying is the meek will inherit the earth. The meek are by definition people who have children. And by definition, the people who have children will inherit the earth. There's no question about that. And this is precisely what happened to Protestantism in America when their churches approved contraception. They stopped having children. Well, they're concerned about people who are having children. The two main groups were the Catholics and the blacks. So my oldest son went to Harvard. I once gave a talk. What is the main requirement to go to Harvard? Existence. If you don't exist, you can't go to Harvard. What am I talking about? I'm talking about all of those rich people, the WASP elite, the Protestant elite, who accepted contraception as some type of good thing and failed to have children. That's why my son went to Harvard, because he existed. He existed because I had 5 children and was plunged into poverty because when I had the first child, but God provided for me. This is a lesson that we had to learn the hard. There's St. Augustine talked about being a child, and he said, I was greedy at my mother's breast. I just greedy for the milk that came out of my mother's breast. And also he had nurses too. I was greedy for that. And then he said, and it was at my mother's breast that I learned about the abundance of divine providence. Now there's a theological lesson that you learn when you are nursed by your mother. And I was deprived of it, because science became between me and my mother bottle fed me. This is the type of intervention that took place in our culture, American culture, over this period of time, that over the long haul had a devastating effect on morality, belief in God, and all kinds of other things.
Okay. I've got like a technical problem where I can't highlight people's comments. But I like to get your response to maybe tricky or unusual questions. One is, and I can't click it on the screen, but Elliot says, how many times should a husband have, I guess, sex per month? Now, I mentioned something like he might be one, possibly referring to something I've had a let's say a study on, which is that if you don't masturbate, they were counting people masturbating and saying you must masturbate at least 21 times. And I think you should have sex, not masturbate, at least 21 times in a month. I think that's healthy. And if you don't, I think it was there's some sort of gland that produces the sperm or something goes out of control, and you have all sorts of problems as you grow up. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yes. First of all, you should never masturbate. It's a sin. It's a mortal sin. You should never do that because sex is created for two people. It is intrinsically created for two people, and it's intrinsically ordered toward fertility. In other words, the main goal is procreation. So you should never masturbate because that thwarts the whole idea of sex. Okay, it's not rational behavior. Okay. Secondly, the only prescription, okay, for sex, according to the Catholic, between a man and a woman, is that it's open to life. That's the only prescription. That's the only thing you have to follow. You cannot thwart that intention put there by God. And so in terms, the Catholic Church will never say you have to have sex a certain number of times. That's completely up to the couple, and that changes with time. So, when you're first married, okay, you're probably going to have sex a lot more than when you have the child. That leads to having a child, and then there are going to be natural barriers then to having sex at certain points. And then that will continue if you're normal. It will continue for about 20 years, of where you continue. If you breastfeed, it will limit the fertility, and you'll probably have a child every 2 years for 20 years, which means you'll probably have 10 children. In terms of my personal life, we had 11. My wife had 11 pregnancies, but only 5 of them eventuated in children. So we have five children. So all of these factors come into it. And then you get older, and then that has another effect. Your children move. So the number of times you have sex is going to depend on where you are in a particular phase of your life. And the church would never say you have to have it a certain way. This is, I'm going to say, I'll be honest, this strikes me as Islamic, where you're getting into particularities that I don't think are necessary.
I mean, there's no Islamic law that says you should have sex this many times. I'm just saying I would agree. So I'm going to agree with you, and I do agree with you that generally masturbating would be against the Islamic way, because if you are masturbating, you're probably thinking about somebody else, but you're not your wife, because you're not having sex with your wife. So there's probably a reason, and I'd say practically it's not going to be good for you, because sex is the whole procedure is supposed to be a certain way, and doing it with your hand is not going to be as healthy, etc., etc. So I would agree with you, but it's not Islamic to say you should have sex a certain number of times. But I do think you should look at sort of data, and the data seems to be in alignment with something else you said. You said you should be, when you have sex, it should be open to having children. You cannot have children, I don't think you can, when your wife is going through a period. And let's say her period is 7 days out of the month. That kind of makes it roughly 21 days, roughly. I just think these numbers kind of add up. So I just thought it was an interesting number. But I'm not saying you have to have sex that many times. I wanted to so I think this is a key way to overcome let's say the evil powers by having children. And great. I want to come back to like the main idea again about how do you overcome the Zionist powers. And you said something else that fascinated me or interested me, and that were in the Dean show, which is the other Islamic channel that you were on recently, and that is the Zionists are crazy. And that kind of struck me, because although they seem very clever to be able to accumulate power and through all sorts of ways, through Hollywood and through banks, etc., they do seem quite crazy in the sense that there's all sorts of things they're doing that seem to be just backfiring, and they could have won in many ways if they carried on being a bit more constructive rather than destructive. What do I mean? So recently they bought TikTok, right? But if
Yep.
you're going to buy TikTok and you're going to announce that you're going to change the algorithm so nobody can talk about you, then people are just going to leave, because that recently happened. They just went to a Chinese app and they're just going to, and so they're going to lose all their money because the value of TikTok's going to go down. And there's so many other examples I can think of where they could win if they, for example, they use the Palestinians rather than killing them. They would dominate Israel and they would
Right.
dominate everywhere. But I would say, my understanding is they have a short, even though they seem, I feel like I'm going to contradict myself, but they have a sort of short-term lust for having it now and everything right now.
Yeah.
But I'm contradicting myself because they've been working at many of their plans, like the Rothschilds have been working at their plans for hundreds of years, so a couple of hundred years maybe, I'm not sure how long. So what do you think? I feel like they've got a weird, I don't know, lust for power, short-term thing. I'm not sure what
I think we have to be more specific rather than say crazy. I may have said that, but you have to be more specific. What are we talking about? We're talking about irrational. Irrational. Why do I say that? Because of the fund. I had to, when I decided I'm going to write this book called The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, I had to go back and I say, well, what's a Jew? And when did this thing come into existence? It came into existence at the time of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, Logos is God. That means reason is God, and God is reason. And Jesus Christ is the Logos incarnate. He's the Word made flesh, to use another term. And they killed him. Jews killed him. And when they killed, this is a rejection of Logos, which is a rejection of rationality. And it's not just rationality, it's the order of the universe that God created. There's an order to this universe, and you're rejecting everything. And when you become that, you become a revolutionary. And you're never happy unless you're destroying something. And so you bring them into countries like the Christian West, where they spent 1,000 years, whatever it is, building up a civilization that is a beautiful civilization, a powerful civilization. And then America, which is the same thing. And you're only happy by destroying it. Well, you destroy things. You can be sitting on a limb and you can saw the limb off that you're sitting on. And that's precisely what they do. Why do they do that? What's the other iconographic symbol of the Jew? It's synagogue. Synagogue is blind. It's a lady with a blindfold. So they don't understand what they're doing. They fundamentally, they're led by their lust for power, their lust for money. And when your lust makes you blind, that's what I wrote a book called Libido Dominandi, Sexual Liberation and Political Control. Lust makes you blind and you're following your passions. And sometimes you get into trouble because you follow your passions. The classic example is Samson, the great hero of the Hebrews. He falls in love with Delilah, and she seduces him. And guess what the symbol is? The symbolism of his loss of power. They cut out his eyes. He can't see anymore, and seeing is rationality. And so if you're following this attack on rationality, you're going to be blind. And if you follow your passions, God will take your evil and turn it into good in ways that you don't expect. So I said this before, you want to destroy the Western cultures. Let's bring in these Muslims. Yeah, that will destroy your culture. Oh, wait a minute. It turns out they're more conservative than the natives. And the very thing that you're promoting, sexual liberation, is the least thing on the mind of these Muslim families when they arrive in your country. So you bring about the opposite of what you intend. This is in the Bible. It's in the Quran too. It's the part of it. The story of Joseph is in the Quran. But at the end of Genesis, Joseph is sold into slavery. He comes a high position under the Pharaoh. Israel is now starving to death. They have to come to grain. He suddenly exposes himself. And the end of Genesis is also the story of all of human history when Joseph turns to his brothers and said, "The evil that you intended to do to me has been turned by God's power into good." That's the story of the people who follow God, who are meek, who submit themselves to God's law. God will turn their evil into good, the evil of those people, and they will be dumbfounded and they won't understand how it happened.
Yeah, that seems a beautiful way in some ways to wrap things up. But I don't know quite wrap. I mean, what would I say? What I mean is that sometimes a lot of people nowadays feel like there's no hope. The Jews are too powerful, etc. But God has his ways, and we never have any doubt that God can do whatever he wants. So yeah, I totally agree with that kind of that feeling. That just want to throw in a few questions from the many comments. I suppose a question for me: does Khalid think the Ummah, that is the? Do you know any of these phrases like Ummah?
Yeah, Ummah is the people of the Islamic people.
Yeah. Do they act as one? No, I don't think they really act as one, but because they've got a degree of common morality, they seem to be more united than other groups, more united.
If I can interrupt you, do you know what will unite people?
Yeah.
Going to another country. Going to another country. You go down to my old neighborhood, they have Indo-Pakistani restaurants. That's what happens when you move to another country. Suddenly the differences disappear and you come up with a new ethnic, a kind of new identity that is a unification of things that were separate before you left.
Cool. Yeah. That does have a degree of create a degree of unity. There's Chinatown, all the Chinese get together and because they're like-minded in some ways. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool. Would you like to summarize any ideas about our the Muslim Catholic partnership? And maybe I think there's one basic question that I had in mind, but I think, and as a sort of introduction, I did call it the Muslim Catholic partnership rather than Muslim Christian partnership. I get the sense that you say Catholic rather than Christian, even though you consider yourself Christian, and the point is that you're the original Christians and you keep to the original laws. Is that right?
Yes. And the other reason I'm saying this is because Protestantism is disappearing. It's not the force that it was. It was very important for American identity. Samuel Huntington said an American is an Anglo-Protestant. But one of the things, the casualties of the Third Republic, when the Third Republic disappears, Protestantism is going to disappear with it. Emmanuel Todt said this in a book in France, La Défaite de l'Occident. It hasn't been translated into English yet. But he said that the Protestantism is the hidden grammar of the American empire. The American empire is collapsing because Protestantism is disappearing. And I think that's true. My difference is I don't think he understands the hidden grammar of Protestantism. So, and I deal with that in my book. It's called Walking with a Bible and a Gun. It's available at fidelitypress.org. Don't go to Amazon. They banned me. Okay. But I think that this is part of what's happening right now. One of the reasons that I'm not saying Christian anymore, because I don't think there's going to be Protestantism in a very short period of time. It had a 500-year run. It should have never come into existence. It had an impact on history, and I think it's over. And that's another reason why I'm just saying it should be a Catholic Muslim alliance. The other thing is that at this point, you've got Protestantism splitting into the mainstream, which have been taken over by homosexuals, the Church of England, the Presbyterians, and the Methodists. They're going to go out of existence because homosexuality is not going to last. On the other side, that's the Tucker Carlson side. He's an Episcopalian. On the other side, you have Ted Cruz, and they're all Jews. They call themselves Christian Zionists, but they're all Jews. So it's going to disappear. It's going to split into those two groups, and there won't be anything, but the Catholic Church will be there.
Okay, so I'd like you to wrap up and explain, what do you think the nature of our long-term relationship, hopefully, of a Muslim Catholic unity, or what do we call it?
Alliance.
Alliance.
We're not going to have unity. Okay,
We're not going to have unity. Exactly.
We're not going to have unity. All the Catholics become Muslims, or all the Muslims become Catholics, and maybe Allah has that in mind at some point, but that's not the way it is right now. The model I'm proposing is the model that I think was successful in America. So you have a time at the founding of America. I'm talking about the English colonies. You have all of these Protestant sects. You got Calvinists, you got the Anglicans in Virginia, you got the Quakers in Philadelphia, you got all these Protestant sects, and they can't talk to each other because they're all crazy in one way or another. Okay. And they're not rational. And so what the founding fathers said was, well, we can't have an established church because no one's going to agree on it. You should have an established church, but we don't know what it is because they're all crazy. The founding fathers were not Christians. They were deists. And they didn't like Christianity. They thought it was crazy. It just led to wars. But what did they believe in? They believed that you had to have a moral consensus. And John Adams said specifically, we have no constitution that functions in the absence of a moral people. And I think that's what America did have. We had a shared consensus that there were certain things that were right and certain things that were wrong, and specifically in sexual morality. So if you take a man like Ralph Waldo Emerson, he's a Satanist when it comes to thinking because he read Paradise Lost. We should have a whole program on Paradise Lost and the influence that had on America. But anyway, he's a Satanist when he said, nothing matters but the integrity of your own mind. And someone said, well, that may be from below. And Emerson said, well, if that's from the devil, then I am of the devil's party. But he remained faithful to his wife. And then he went over to England and he met with Thomas Carlyle, and Charles Dickens, the two great thinkers in England. And they're complaining about the collapse of sexual morality in London and Paris. And he said to them, if you think that American men don't go to their marriage beds as virgins, you don't understand America. Now, that was the paradox. You can be a Satanist when you're thinking, but when it comes to acting according to morality, you stay with your wife. That was destroyed. That consensus was destroyed, and I'll give you a guess. You guess, tell me who destroyed it. You tell me.
I mean, a particular name or a group?
Group. What group destroyed it?
You're going to say the Jews?
I am going to say the Jews because that's the correct answer to that question. And so in the period after World War II, the Jews were constantly trying to destroy obscenity laws. They were promoting abortion. They were promoting all forms of sexual liberation. And they controlled Hollywood. And Hollywood was propaganda for all of that type of stuff. And my generation fell for it to their dismay. So I'm going, if you're going to talk about this alliance between Muslims and Catholics, I'm saying it has to be based on a common acceptance of the moral law. And we're not going to talk about theology, but we have to accept the moral law. We have to accept the fact that you cannot kill the innocent, which means you cannot allow for abortion. You can't kill the innocent children by abortion or by F-16s in Gaza. You cannot do that. That is two characteristics of the Jewish mind. The ability, the desire to kill the innocent, the inability to prohibit the killing of the innocent. We have to agree on that. And then we can see where else that leads. But this has to be this is the foundation, the theoretical foundation of any possible alliance between Muslims and Catholics.
Cool. I think we'll have, I feel like because you brought up abortion, we need to have a bunch of rational discussions about supporting these moral ideas. I do think there are a few exceptions to when you can have abortions, but we'll go into those details or to have that discussion later on. But I look forward to a partnership between us, maybe once a month or something. That'd be really good.
I'd be happy to. I think it's a necessary discussion. We have to break down this propaganda campaign against Muslims, demonizing Muslims. It's paid for by Jews. It's divide and conquer, and we can't allow ourselves to be pawns in their game.
Yeah, I think our common goal, I guess, is submission to the will of God. And if I, as a Muslim, if I can get more Christians or Catholics, whatever they want to call themselves, to be more godly, that's great. That's from a Muslim perspective, that's fantastic. So if we can do that, I'm very pleased with that. And I've said that often to when I was debating in Speaker's Corner, debating with Christians. I was like, just be better Christians. If you don't become a Muslim, I recommend you become a Muslim. But if you don't want to be a Muslim because you've got sort of like, you're either racist or you just find it too foreign, just be a better Christian. And it'll be better for humanity. You'd have more white people in the UK rather than all the white people dying out, etc., etc. Anyway, rather than me ranting on, let's finish it off. I really appreciate your time and hopefully catch you in about a month. Thank you very much, Dr. E. Michael Jones.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Salam.
Wa alaikum assalam. Peace be upon you too.